I want to talk to those of you who are among the 110,000 or so of my fellow citizens of the state of Maryland who signed the petition to subject the new same-sex marriage law to a public referendum on Election Day this coming November. I wonder how many of you have actually had a chance to read the law that you are going to be voting either for or against. If you sign the petition, I assume you intend to vote for the repeal of the law. So before we get to November, I want to at least share with you what the law actually says. This is the text of the law as signed by Governor O'Malley and passed by the House of Delegates and the Maryland State Senate. And the law reads as follows. Section 1. Be it enacted by the General Assembly of Maryland that the laws of Maryland read as follows. Only a marriage between two individuals who are not otherwise prohibited from marriage is valid in this state. And then there's a lengthy section which defines which individuals are prohibited from marrying in this state. For instance, an individual may not marry the individual's, and then it's a list of relatives, grandparent, parent, child, sibling, grandchild. One section of the law is the actual law which allows for same-sex marriages by altering the definition of marriage. And the rest of the law is devoted exclusively to spelling out in great detail the protections offered to religious organizations, ensuring that by force of law, no religious organization in the state of Maryland will ever be compelled to perform a same-sex marriage against its own will and will never be punished for refusing to perform a same-sex marriage, or indeed any type of marriage that goes against its own internal code, its own internal doctrines. That's the law. That's the law that you signed a petition to have repealed. So why do I bring this up? Well, two reasons. First, I think if you are going to not only sign a petition to subject a piece of legislation that has been lawfully passed and enacted by your legislators and your governor to a public referendum, but also go to the polls in November to vote yea or nay on the question of whether or not this law should be allowed to stand, you should know what the law actually says. A lot of people were told they were signing a petition that would protect families in Maryland or protect traditional marriage in Maryland. And as you can plainly see, if you read the law yourself or if you were listening as I read the law just now, the law does absolutely nothing to threaten families or to threaten traditional marriage. That's been a very popular argument by foes of same-sex marriage, telling us that it will destroy traditional marriage. And as you can see from the law itself, which I've just read you and which you are free to look up yourself, the law has nothing to say about traditional marriage at all. It does not narrow the definition of marriage. It broadens the definition of marriage to eliminate the sexual distinction. That's all it does. If you are a heterosexual person like I am, and you are married to a person of the opposite sex, your marriage is not affected by this law at all. If you are a heterosexual person and you are romantically involved with a person of the opposite sex, and you want to marry that person at some point in the future in the state of Maryland, your plans will not have to be changed at all. Your marriage is still legal. It will still be just as valid after this law goes into effect as it would have been had this law never been passed. Your life changes not a single bit. The only thing that does change is that the lives of hundreds of thousands of your fellow Marylanders, your fellow Americans, your fellow human beings will be changed, because those who live in Maryland who are involved in same-sex partnerships, who want to solemnize that union, who want to make that official and celebrate their union in the form of a civil marriage, will now have that right. And extending that right to those people does nothing to take it away from the people who already have it. A good analogy might be the right to vote, because the definition of a voter in the United States has been changed many times throughout the history of the United States, just as the definition of marriage has been changed. That's another argument that people often say, that this will fundamentally change the definition of marriage, as though this has never happened before. It's not true. Marriage has been redefined many times throughout our history. But yes, we have changed the definition of a voter several times in several very important ways since the founding of the nation. Originally, it was only white male owners of land who were allowed to vote in elections in the United States. This was changed first to eliminate the land ownership requirement, so that citizens who were white and male, regardless of whether they owned land or not, were able to vote. That was a big deal. A lot of people were against that, and if you look hard enough, you can find people today who are still against that. The second big change was after the Civil War, when the voting franchise was extended once again, this time by removing the racial requirement. Now you could be a male citizen and have the right to vote, and your racial status, whether you were white or black or whatever, had nothing to do with it. That was removed from the definition. And then the final major redefinition of a voter in the United States, the final expansion of that franchise, came in the 1920s when the sexual distinction was removed from the definition. Now, these were major redefinitions of what it meant to be a voter, to be eligible to vote in the United States of America, that took place throughout our history. It didn't just happen once, it happened several times. And each time, no one lost their right to vote. When the property requirement was taken away and people were allowed to vote regardless of whether they owned property or not, those who had the right to vote prior to that redefinition retained that right. When the racial requirement was removed, and it became all male citizens of the United States over the age of 18 were eligible to vote. The people who had been eligible to vote, the white men who had been eligible to vote before black men gained that right, still had the right to vote. They retained their right. Giving it to other people did not remove it from those who already had it. And the same thing happened in 1920 when the franchise was expanded to include women, to remove the sexual distinction, so that citizens over the voting age were eligible to vote regardless of whether they were male or female. Those who already had the right to vote, the guys, did not lose their right to vote. And there's something else that's not in the law that maybe you didn't notice wasn't there when I was reading it, and that is, this law does not require you to change your mind about gay people at all. If you are a person who thinks that gay marriage is wrong, if you are a person who thinks that there's something wrong with gay people, that you don't like gay people, you don't like what you think you know about gay culture, you don't like what you think you know about gay relationships, whatever, the law has nothing to say to you. Your life will be completely unchanged. I'm asking you, as a fellow Marylander, as a fellow American, as a fellow human being, on election day, when you go to the polls and you get to the part on your ballot where it asks you whether or not we should keep this law, to vote to keep this law, because it does nothing to harm you, no matter who you are. It does nothing to harm the institution of marriage, no matter what you conceive that institution to be. It takes nothing away. It gives something to someone else, so that they might have the same right that people like you and I have and take for granted, and have taken for granted for hundreds of years. It doesn't make you affirm gay people. It doesn't make you approve of gay people. It doesn't make you change your opinion. It doesn't require you to keep your mouth shut about gay people one bit. It affirms the ideal that in a free society, in a pluralistic society, we should all have the right to pursue our happiness as we see fit, so long as we are not harming other people. Legalizing same-sex marriage harms no one. Refusing to legalize same-sex marriage continuing to withhold that right from your fellow citizens, consigning them to a continued life of second-class citizenship, that does harm people. That does prevent people from pursuing their happiness. And that's wrong. And I would ask you, again, as a Marylander, as an American, as a human being, to stand up against that, to join me, to join the other people in your state who are straight, who are gay, who are Christian, who are Jewish, who are Muslim, who are atheist, who are white, who are black, who are Hispanic, who have decided that regardless of their personal opinion of gay people and same-sex marriage, that voting against this law is wrong, that there's no reason to vote against this, that there's no reason to expect our own private beliefs to be reflected in the laws of our state, that it's not the state's job to impose our values on people who don't hold those values. It's been a very, very long, hard struggle for certain members of our community to attain these rights that are given to them finally in this law. And I'm asking you not to take that away from them, to act on election day, to speak out, to vote, to allow them to keep these rights that they have so justly deserved and fought for, and after such a long struggle, gained and very much wish to keep. That's what I'm asking. That's my message to you. And I hope that you've listened to all this, and I hope that you'll at least take it under consideration between now and Election Day in November. Thank you.